starting with the pituitary gland, which lies at the base of the brain in a structure called the sella tertia of the sphenoid bone. It's attached to the hypothalamus by a pituitary stalk known as the infundulum. It has two distinct portions, the anterior lobe and the posterior lobe. The anterior lobe is adenohypophysis, and the posterior lobe is neurohypophysis. It has a direct connection to the hypothalamus through that infundulum, and secretion from two of the lobes of the pituitary gland are controlled by different methods by the hypothalamus, so the two sides of the pituitary gland. The anterior lobe, the hypothalamic, releases hormones that are transported through the hypophyseal portal system. Portal system is a special way that blood is set up. So blood goes from an artery to a vein, usually. In this case, blood will go from an arterial to an arterial and then to a vein. And that will stimulate cells of the anterior lobe to release their hormones. Whereas the posterior lobe is regulated by nerve impulses from the hypothalamus that travel through the infundulum and stimulate nerve endings in the posterior lobe to release their hormones. So hypothalamic control of peripheral endocrine glands. So the hypothalamus, which is an endocrine gland, controls hormone secretions from peripheral endocrine glands in a three-step pathway. Each one of the hypothalamic releasing hormones acts on a specific hormone secreting cell in the anterior pituitary gland. The anterior pituitary hormone acts on cells in a peripheral endocrine gland to stimulate its excretion, and usually there are multiple negative feedback controls involved in the pathways. So for example, over here we see the hypothalamus releasing hormone. It acts on the anterior pituitary. The anterior pituitary releases a hormone, and that hormone works on a target's peripheral endocrine gland, and causing that to release a hormone that acts on its targets. So, the third hormone is a negative feedback for both the anterior and the hypothalamus. The second hormone is a negative feedback for the hypothalamus. And we'll get some specific examples that I think will make that a little clearer for you. The anterior pituitary hormones. The anterior lobe has glandular epithelial tissue and is secreted by one of 5 types of secretory cells. Each hormone in the anterior lobe is released in response to a releasing hormone from the hypothalamus, and some are inhibited by hormones from the hypothalamus as well. The anterior pituitary hormones would be growth hormone, prolactin, thyroid stimulating hormone, adenocorticotropic hormone, follicle stimulating hormone, and luteinizing hormone. So growth hormone is released in response to growth hormone releasing factor. It is inhibited by another hormone from the hypothalamus called somatostatin. Prolactin releasing factor and prolactin inhibiting hormone work on the prolactin producing cells. Thyrotropin or thyroid stimulating hormone releasing hormone is going to act on thyroid stimulating hormone. Corticotropic releasing hormone is going to act on adrenocorticotropic hormone, and gonadotropic releasing hormone will work on both luteinizing and follicle stimulating, which have specific targets. So we have, again, one hormone released from the hypothalamus, which acts on the anterior pituitary to cause the release or inhibition in a couple of cases of the hormone. So those hormones do the following. Growth hormone stimulates cells to enlarge and divide rapidly, increases amino acid uptake, protein synthesis, decreases the use of carbohydrates for energy, and increases the rate of fat burning in cells. And most cells have receptors for growth hormone. Prolactin promotes milk production in females. We really don't know what it does in males. It may just be leftover part of evolution, like nipples on males. Thyroid stimulating hormones stimulates the secretion of thyroid hormone. When we get to it, we'll see there are two forms of that thyroid hormone, T3 and T4, and they come from the thyroid gland. The adrenocorticotropic hormones stimulate the secretion of cortisol and other glucocorticoids from the adrenal cortex. Follicle stimulating hormone causes growth and development of ovarian follicles in females. It does a similar effect. It works on sperm production in males. Luteinizing hormone causes ovulation in females, and it is a sex hormone in both causes the production of sex hormone in both genders. Make sure. So thyroid stimulating hormone has got a 2-method and a 3-step pathway. Thyroid stimulating hormone secretion is controlled to some extent by the level of thyrotropin releasing hormone from the hypothalamus. Thyroid stimulating hormone secretion is also controlled by negative feedback with the thyroid hormones, and those are the final hormones in the pathway. So the anterior pituitary can release TRH that would cause TSH to be released, and from the that would cause the thyroid gland to release its thyroid hormones, and those thyroid hormones would further inhibit the release. Growth hormones, ups and downs. Hypopituitary dwarfism is caused by a deficiency of growth hormone during childhood. Short stature, but proportion and body proportions and mental development are normal. Treatments have to start before the bones completely ossify in order with giving exogenous growth hormone. Giantism is caused by the oversecretion of growth hormone during childhood. Height can exceed 8 feet, and there may be other metabolic problems associated with that. It's often caused by a pituitary tumor. And then acromegalia is caused by oversecretion of growth hormone, but it happens during adulthood after the epiphyseal plates have ossified. So you don't get any increase in height that way, but you do get thicker bones, and you get enlargement of other things like tongue, nose, hands, feet, jaw, heart, thyroid gland. Posterior pituitary hormones. The posterior lobe consists of nerve fibers from the hypothalamus and the neuroglia, not glandular like we had in the front, the anterior. 2 hormones are produced by neurons in the hypothalamus. They are then stored and released by the posterior pituitary gland, and they are transported to the posterior pituitary gland through the pituitary stalk or the infundulum. Those hormones are antidiuretic hormone, ADH, also called vasopressin, and oxytocin. ADH decreases urine production by reducing the volume of water in the kidneys, and it also can cause vasoconstriction directly, and that would increase blood pressure, which is why it has the name vasopressin. Oxytocin causes muscle contractions in the uterine wall during childbirth, milk ejection during lactation. Again, it shows up in males, but we really don't know exactly what it is doing. Again, it may be a holdover. So I won't walk you through all of these hormones as we just went through them. You have this in your book. Again, I can't stress enough that you need to use this book and the information in it while you are doing your homework, while you are studying for your tests. You can't just listen to these lectures and expect to get all you need to get.